Hi, I'm Jeff Davis, and today I'm taking you back in time as we travel on the wine road. When you drive to Foppiano Vineyards in Russian River Valley, you can see that this winery is steeped in history. The family has been rooted in Sonoma County for 162 years. It began when Giovanni Foppiano emigrated to the U.S. in 1855, initially to find gold in Sonora, California. It was running dry by then, so he made his way to Sonoma County. He bought an existing farm that may have had vineyards, in addition to fruit trees and other crops. Then in 1896, he established Foppiano Vineyards, and it has continued ever since. Through world wars, prohibition, recessions, through all of it, the family has persisted. I'll be talking with three gentlemen from the winery, starting with the president and family member, Paul Foppiano. I said, 121 years. You must be proud to be part of such an historic and successful lineage.
Yeah, absolutely it is. To be fifth generation is very proud, and it's a good feeling to be on the same ranch that, my great-great-grandfather farmed. That's cool. I mean, he plowed this ground with a horse and a plow, and now we're using fancy $50,000 tractors and everything, but it's, people speak to the word sustainability. I like steward to the land, I think is a much better term. And that's where I see myself, as somebody that wants to pass the ranch on to future generations and the business also. But I want to leave this vineyard in a better place than was left to me. Whether it's using less harsh chemicals, whatever it is in farming today, that we've stepped up our technology and our practices so well as an entire community in Sonoma County. That's what I really strive for.
Yeah. Was it Louis J. who was born here in the house that ended up becoming his office? I love hearing those kind of stories.
Yeah, actually the office that we're looking at right behind us here is one of the old, it's actually the Louis J. room now, and my grandfather and his two sisters were born in that back bedroom of the house, and then they moved up to the house out front in 1918. And so my grandfather lived on the ranch his entire life. He built a house in the 60s down on the other side of the property, but he never left the property his entire life. Pretty rare nowadays.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny, the wine industry has this reputation for being classy, somewhat intimidating, but when people come to visit, especially here in Sonoma County, they can see that it's still very much an agricultural business. And looking at you, I mean, you don't look like a typical president.
No, you caught me with my work clothes on today. Last 2 weeks ago, I was back east doing some traveling, so I've got it's hard to put lipstick on a pig, but we do our best, But no, I'm a farmer first, and I'm the guy that likes to go kick the dirt clods and work with the crew. Wouldn't ask my employees to do anything I wouldn't do myself.
So do I understand there is a sixth generation that is possibly going to be taking over someday?
Yeah, there is. There's three little girls, or actually four, excuse me. My cousin has two younger daughters. I have a 12-year-old daughter, Gianna, and then my sister has a little daughter too, but Gianna's the oldest of the group, and she lives here with me, so she's bouncing around. She knows the different blocks. She knows the ranch. It's kind of cool. Whether she'll take it on or not, that's her decision.
Yeah, that's nice of you to not force her into anything.
Absolutely not. No, I wouldn't ever do that. It's her decision if she wants to carry it on, but she'll get there in time.
Yeah. I understand that there's a block named after her, though.
There is. One of the older Petite Sirah blocks. We've been doing the Gianna's Block Reserve, and I think we've been doing it since '08 or '09, I believe was the first vintage. And last year at the Sonoma County Harvest Fair, we won double gold with it, so it was pretty cool. So Get her to sign a few bottles, and not very many little kids get to do that, so she takes she gets a kick out of that at her age. It's good for her.
Yeah. One line I came across on your website that I thought was impressive was the line from wine critic Robert Parker, who said, this long-established winery seems to have a sensible approach to offering value. And I think that sums it up pretty well, because you guys offer some wonderful wine, but your prices are quite reasonable.
Absolutely. We've always wanted to produce wines that the general public can drink. And in doing that, I want a wine that the average working man can go afford to buy. And that's what we are. And, we want to be able to share the labors of our fruit with them. And that's always been the idea, is try to keep it in a nice price range with Sonoma County. Russian River, always want to speak to the estate and the terroir, and you can see that as you taste through our line of wines. It's very special.
Petite Sirah is your flagship wine, but you've added a few fairly recently in the last few years, since Zinfandel and Chardonnay. And what do you see for the upcoming 21st century?
Well, Petite Sirah will always be the backbone of Foppiano Vineyards. It'll always be that way as long as I have anything to say about it. But also, we've gotten back in the Sauvignon Blanc and the Chardonnay business. We have great vineyards here that produce really nice grapes and make a fabulous wine. And then also, like you said, the Zinfandel has really come on board. And also Pinot Noir, being right here in the Russian River Valley, we have a great Pinot at a super fantastic price, for being an estate wine. And we're really proud of those wines.
Hey, Paul, it's been a real pleasure talking with you. I'm going to chat with the other guys here that help support the winery here and continued success. I know I don't really have to say that because it's kind of already this big engine that's in motion. It's on its own.
Yeah, well, it is. But at the same time, it's just, every year's different. And that's the great part about farming is every year you have to work around Mother Nature. And, it's a fun challenge because you never know what you're going to get until the season's over. So thank you very much.
President, vineyard manager, and family member of Foppiano Vineyards, Paul Foppioano. And now I move over to chat with the winemaker, Nova Peril, who is not a family member, but has quite a background in the area, having worked 7 years at Dry Creek Vineyards, just up the road. Being well aware of Foppiano's legacy, I asked him if he feels a certain responsibility to uphold the reputation as a winemaker who is not a family member.
Well, it's funny because they've always, it seems like, throughout their winemaking history here, they've always kind of employed outsiders to do the winemaking. And Paul, who we just spoke with, he has a great palate. He likes to be involved with a lot of the tasting and blending and things like that. But they've always seemed to have lent it to somebody else to do that part of it, and given their feedback. I understand that the old man, the original patriarch, Mr. Foppiano himself, had a good palate too, and I think he probably did a lot of the winemaking before what we think of winemaking exists. He must have done it in a traditional sense, where you're transferring fruit from the vineyard to the winery, and magically it turns into wine. The concept, modern winemaking concepts, have really only been adopted, I guess since maybe the 60s or something like that. Before that it was very much more let it happen how it wants. I mean, I'm not even sure if they were inoculating with yeast, prior to the 70s and 60s, but they knew wine would get made. If you brought it into the winery and crushed it, it would turn into wine eventually. So you don't really need a winemaker in that sense, but they've been more addicted to the land than the winery itself. So I do feel privileged to be part of that group. I think it's great dealing with the history. I've always, this doesn't apply perfectly, but I've always thought about those old smokehouses like in Brooklyn or something like that, where they've had 100 years of flavor put on the walls, the chimneys of these where they're smoking meats and stuff. That does not always apply to winemaking because you want the walls clean, of course, but I think that there's so many vintages have come through. I mean, I bet that there's a lot going on behind the scenes here to give the wine its unique flavor.
Yeah. You think they invite people like you to come along because they're open-minded to new ideas and new techniques that still work within their idea of Petite Sirah and what the family's doing, but gives them a different viewpoint of how to make and release wine?
Well, I think it helps to have another set of eyes. When you respect that set of eyes and can appreciate what they're going to say, is a valuable thing. There's no doubt about it. So if you can imagine their point of view, Paul, for example, he knows the property here like the back of his hand, and he works it regularly, and so he knows what it can do, what it can't do, and if he's going to deliver a high-quality product and grapes, whether it's Pinot Noir or Chardonnay or the famous Petite Sirah here, he's going to deliver it, and he gives me some feedback, and then he allows me to kind of put my spin on it from a professional standpoint. He's doing his professional due diligence, and I'm doing mine, and it turns out like it's a great symmetry there.
Yeah, as we discussed, they just recently, in the last few years, integrated Zinfandel and Chardonnay, and so you got to stay on top of what's popular out there. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, if you can imagine this property like in 1870, or when the winery was finally bonded, and in later 1800s. Back then, this was very rural. right? So you can imagine that this piece of property had to have had some characteristics from a farming point of view that made it stand out, like the pick of the litter in a sense. So the way I envision this place is that it's got so many little microclimates to make it a productive homestead. You've got the property right down by the river. It's very cool, and as the benches move away from the river and we get closer to the what is 101 now, Old Redwood Highway, and essentially closer to Alexander Valley, it gets warmer. So you have everything from the coolest climate in wine growing terms to one of the warmer ones, and how perfect for matching up varietals. You have Pinot and Chardonnay down by the river. You have the lighter reds in the middle area, and then Petite Sirah and even Cabernet here on the estate, and they all flourish. It's really, really amazing. We are a bit cooler, but that heat allows us to ripen the reds. But the beauty of it is the cooling of the river overnight gives things like the Zinfandel. It's just an added flavor characteristic. It's a little bit of red fruit, a little bit of raspberry. It makes it stand out. So when you have, it's not that they want to produce something that is popular, it's that we have something that people want. And keep in mind, we only do 200, 300, 400 cases of each one of these estate. The main business really is grapes and bulk wine to other wineries who have gotten accustomed to appreciating our wine. So we take the select amount, bottle a couple hundred cases of everything to really showcase the ranch. We do a very small reserve blend of 60 to 100 cases for wine club members only. But we are producing things that people want. If people didn't want it, we would do something else.
Sure.
He's Nova Peril. What a cool name, huh? He's the winemaker at Foppiano Vineyards. You heard him mention that they sell a bulk of their harvested grapes to other wineries. They also have something to offer that no other winery in the area has, that I've come across anyway. We'll talk about that next, as On the Wine Road continues. We are back on the Wine Road. I'm Jeff Davis. I'm at the oldest family-run winery in Sonoma County, Foppiano Vineyards, celebrating 121 years. Now, you may have heard that a new fermentation and aging technique used these days are concrete tanks and vessels. Some are shaped like very large eggs. Well, Foppioano has these massive concrete tanks that have been part of their history for decades.
Yeah, that is it's remarkable to just be kind of in the presence of those tanks because of their size. They're just the most massive. They really hold up the building. There's two sets of concrete tanks, one on each side of the building, and literally it just looks like they span some joists across the top, and they are the foundation of the building. And they were poured in late 1930s, 37, 38, something like that.
Wow.
And one bank is 200,000 gallons worth of space, broken up into three 50,000 gallon tanks and then two 25,000. And being inside is like being inside of a house. I mean, you don't really grasp how much space that is until you're there, and it literally is significantly bigger than a lot of the houses and apartments I've lived in my early years in college and stuff like that. I think we should rent these things out. They're so dang big. And I don't have a blend big enough to fit into a 50,000 gallon tank. So that era of those being useful on a day-to-day scale is kind of behind us
Because they are so big, huh?
Because they're so big, and again, folks that have been around winemaking, have some expertise there, know that the best tank is a top tank. You know, if a wine tank becomes partial, then it'll react similarly to that partial bottle on your counter. It might taste better the next day. That's good, but as the days go by, it's not going to taste as good. And the same thing is happening in a tank. So if you don't have enough wine to fill a tank, then you should probably pick another tank. And it turns out that we don't make enough wine to fill those. So what we end up doing is contracting them out to other wineries who do have enough volume to fill them, and it's a valuable resource for them. This is really only, we have smaller concretes as well, a couple of 10,000 gallon tanks. Those are great to use. The big ones, though, we'll rent out to some of our larger production neighbors especially during harvest when space is at a premium. We'll rent them out and fill them up, and then when the pressure's off and tank space becomes available at their facilities, they'll pump it out.
We touched upon some of the other varietals briefly that you grow here. Why don't you give us a quick rundown of the other grapes, aside from Petite Sirah that you grow here?
Yeah, aside from the famous Petite Sirah, it's starting at the bottom of the ranch is Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and then working our way up is the Zinfandel, and then Carignan. We actually grow a small block as part of the bringing a little bit of fruit into the Petite. It doesn't always go in there, but we do make a reserve blend out of that wine, and that seems to be, other than the Gianna's block, it seems to be one of the more popular of our reserve lines. I think it's because it's a little bit rare. You don't see it that much, but it makes a great blender for Petite, and so that's growing on the ranch. We have some Cabernet on the ranch that was planted years ago, and Sauvignon Blanc.
Hey, Nova, nice talking with you. I don't want to keep you too much longer because I'm sure you have some work to give to. But thanks for the great information and continued success here.
It's a pleasure to be a part of this long lineage of growing grapes here when it's on the verge of, being popular again, which would be cool. I think this place this estate has a lot to offer, and we're all along for the ride.
Winemaker Nova Farrell of Foppiano Vineyards. They've been on my radar for quite a while now, so I'm glad I finally made it over to the winery just south of Healdsburg. Their wine club manager, Jonathan DeBonis, has become a historian for the winery, so I wanted to talk with him a bit. Here's that conversation. Jonathan, there are certainly a lot of ghosts hanging around here at Foppioano Winery, and it's too bad I can't talk to them and get a real sense of what the history was here in the many, many decades that have passed. But fortunately, you've done a lot of studying, and you know a lot about the family history. So first of all, let me ask you, there's a number of different Lewises that followed Giovanni. Give me a rundown of the Lewises.
Yeah, so the first Lewis was Louis A. Foppiano, and I believe he passed away in about 1924. And then there was Louis J. Foppiano. He was born in 1910, and he ended up taking full control of the winery in 1932, just at the end of the Volstead Act of the Prohibition. And he continued to run the winery up until he fully retired in 2006. So, that's a pretty good long run. And he actually just passed away recently in 2012. He was coming up on 102 when he passed. Then you've got Louis M., who is one of his sons, and he actually just recently retired here. I believe it was in 2015.
He's still hanging around from time to time, I understand?
Oh, yeah, no, he's still around. Shoot, I think he's 69, in and around there. And he's still snowboarding every winter.
Good for him.
Oh, yeah. No, he's a character.
And then there's Paul.
Oh, yeah, Paul, the fifth generation, the current president, vineyard manager. He's still the guy getting up at 4 in the morning to go kick on the frost prevention gear. So, it's we're a real small, tight-knit team, which is really nice. I guess there's just about 9 of us that work here in total. So it's really nice to be part of a small team like that.
I've heard the story in the past about during Prohibition, a lot of the agents would go around and visit wineries, and if they found wine, they would immediately make them dump it. And Foppiano was one of those in 1926. Yeah,
it was August 15th, 1926. We got raided, and they ended up dumping about, it was 140,000 gallons of wine into the ditch out front. And we actually have a picture of that in the tasting room. Louis J. is actually one of the kids in the picture. He's the one wearing the hat. But yeah, no, the federal agents there, as well as 3 guys drinking wine right out of the ditch. And 3 guys that presumably got there first because they're passed out on the other bank.
Huh. While the agent was still standing there?
Yeah, best I could figure it, there's nothing really else, not much else he could do. We're already dumping the wine, so.
Probably just thought, if you want to drink wine out of a ditch, then go ahead. So that occurrence happened right out front of the winery that's still in the same spot.
Yeah, no, it's we've been here for 121 years, never moved. So, every little piece of history in this winery, it all took place right here, which, it's kind of, I just find it fascinating. And speaking of other little bits of history, we have an old barn that was built in the 1900s, and I found one of Louis J.'s ledger books up there. It was from 1933, and then we have another ledger from 1928, and it's it's really cool that all of that stuff is that there's still some of that stuff to be found.
Right. Yeah, there's probably a number of hidden treasures around here. And I love how you have the bottles in the display case over there. Going back to, what was the oldest one again?
The first vintage we bottled here was in 1937. We have a bottle of that sitting in the display case here, as well as a few other older vintages, 69, 1942. We also have and the cool thing about those older vintages is it actually shows the transition from 4/5 of a quart of the bottle size to the metric 750 milliliters. It's really cool to kind of see that transition.
Yeah. And wasn't Foppioano one of the first to do so?
Yeah, we were one of the first in the U.S. to go fully metric in our bottle sizing.
And tell me about the award you won in Bordeaux with your Petite Sirah back in the 90s.
Yeah, there was the Savart Trophy. Apparently we were ranked among the top 13 wineries in the world. We had won it for our 1996 Petite Sirah. So, I mean, and actually currently we do have a little bit of the 1996 Reserve Petite Sirah that we're pouring. It's all thanks to the Corvin, so we don't have to actually open it. But yeah, no, we're pouring a little bit of that. So if anybody wants to see what a 21-year-old bottle of wine tastes like, they can just come on out to the winery.
It's not the exact award winner, but at least from that same vintage.
Yeah, I mean it's
most likely even better since it's the reserve.
It's the reserve version. I mean, it's amazing how well it held up and how well it's tasting right now.
Okay. Yeah, we should definitely invite the On the Wine Road listeners to come up here and try that 96.
Absolutely. We're also pouring a few more of our older vintages alongside of our current vintage estate here, as well as some of our reserves that we only do anywhere between 50 and to 100 cases of. Those wines are, for me, it's kind of a nerdy wine because you're getting an expression of one single vineyard specific site rather than a blend of multiple blocks. So you're getting a lot more character in those wines.
Excellent. This tasting room has some character to it. We've talked about the display case and some of the older vintage bottles you'll see around here, but the roof is a beautiful redwood roof, and I was surprised to learn that there's some history up there.
Yeah, it's back in the 70s when we transitioned to stainless steel tanks, we were still using those old big redwood tanks. And back in the day, you kind of used what you had around. There was no oak barrels, so what we had a lot of was redwood. So with that being said, when we transitioned to stainless steel, they dismantled those old redwood tanks, and they actually built the tasting room out of those redwood tanks. So if you look up at the roof, it's all old growth redwood. There's not a knot in it. And
I'm just amazed at how new it looks. I mean, if you'd have told me that you bought that wood 3 years ago, I'd believe you.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I mean, this tasting room was built in the 1980s, or 1980, actually, exactly. Yeah, no, nothing really has changed. I kind of find myself wondering, how many vintages came through those tanks and how many we're sitting in.
Right. Yeah, I love the wood facade on the bar and the walls over there. And so, yeah, beautiful little tasting room here. And right behind the tasting room here is this classic red Northwestern Pacific train caboose. I understand there's a story behind that.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's so much history here. It would actually be rather difficult to cover it all in just one short interview. How about you folks come out and visit me here in the tasting room, and we'll tell you all about the history of the caboose, the time capsule that's hidden here in the winery, and some of the other little tidbits of just really interesting history.
Jonathan DeBonis. See him in the tasting room and he'll fill you in on much more about Foppioano's 121-year history. Plan some time if you go by Foppioano. They have a self-guided walking tour through their vineyards. There are picnic tables and you can taste their older wines they still have on hand. Foppioano is on Old Redwood Highway just south of Healdsburg. Check them out at Foppioano.com. Foppiano.com. If you'd like to learn more about my show, you can visit onthewineroad.com and on Facebook as well. I'm on Instagram under the name JD Wine Road and on Twitter at JD Wine Road. I'm Jeff Davis. Thanks for listening to this podcast of On the Wine Road.